This series of 4 hip stretches is not going to be what you're used to. We're not just going over the basic 4 stretches. We're going to be going over a warm-up exercise, a stretch, and a strength through length exercise for all 4 areas of the hips that are most commonly tight. These are your posterior hip, your hip flexors, your hamstrings, and your adductors. So let's get started. The first stretch we're going over is a piriformis stretch, or the muscles that kind of sit underneath your glute muscles. But like I said in the warm-up, we're going to be going through one warm-up exercise. We're going to go through the stretch, and then we're going to strengthen through length to make sure that we use those muscles through their full range of motion so we don't get tight again in those areas. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is a fire hydrant. So a fire hydrant is basically laying down on your side and lifting your knee and your foot together. Now I'm going to be doing 15 repetitions or close to it. But really, I just want you to feel like the muscles on the side of your hip and the back of your hip are working. This is very similar to a clamshell. However, when people do clamshells, I find that they tend to roll their hips back and end up using a lot of their back muscles to do that. And so a clamshell, one, it doesn't need a rubber band, it doesn't need a weight. We just have the weight of our leg. A hydrant just needs the weight of your leg. And we want to just make sure that our knee and foot come up relatively together. And already I'm feeling like the side of my hip is working pretty hard. Now I can deadlift a couple 100 pounds, but even just lifting my leg over and over and over is enough to warm these muscles up. So I'm going to be stretching out the right side of my hip here in a second. We're going to be doing a pigeon pose to stretch out our piriformis muscles. All right. And this is going to be, like I said, to stretch out the back of your hip. Now, a pigeon pose is stolen from yoga, but it's a great stretch for the back of the hip. And you're basically getting your shin out in front of your body. Okay, so we have our shin relatively perpendicular to your body. I have my back leg straight, and I'm going to keep my chest up. A lot of times people will want to get down here, but you're also just stretching out your low back muscles, which there's nothing wrong with that. I actually think that it has a time and a place. But we really want to focus on stretching out the hip today, and that's why I'm keeping your chest up. Now, if you feel like you don't get much of a stretch here, or if you feel that this position is uncomfortable on your knee, there is some modifications, and I'm going to show you those right now. The first one being laying on your back, crossing your ankle over your opposite knee. So I'm crossing my right ankle over my left knee and pulling up towards my head. Now, you might feel this a little bit more. Maybe you feel it in a different area of your hip. Or if this is still bothersome to your knee, what you can do is you can take your opposite hand, so my left hand, and I'm pulling my right knee up and over across my body. It's a lot less rotation occurring at my hip when I do this. Now, I'm going to be holding this for about 30 seconds or so. And if you're still in the pigeon pose, just keep holding it. Anywhere between 30 seconds and 5 minutes will get you a relatively similar amount of stretch at the muscle fiber level. So if you're in a pinch, go for 30. If it feels really good and you can sink into it a little bit more and relax a little bit more, try holding as long as you have time for it, really. All right. And so now, after we've stretched, we're going to be going through our strength through length exercise. And now I'm going to show you the one I suggest, but then I'm going to show you a regression or a modification if for some reason it's bothering your knees. And these are going to be 90-90 hip extensions. And so the 90-90 position is a 90-degree bend at your knee, a 90-degree bend between your thighs, and a 90-degree bend at your other knee. From here, we're going up into extension, so I'm using my glute muscle. And then I'm coming back down with control, so I'm stretching that muscle out. I'm actually getting a little bit of that piriformis stretch with this exercise. And I come up and I use that muscle. And then I'm down and I'm up. And I'm going to make 10 of these from the side. I've already done 3 from the side. Looks like this. Down and up. Trying to maintain a nice tall torso. If you need like a chair or a bench to hold on to, that's totally fine too, as long as you're keeping your chest up. But if these are a little difficult, You can always do single leg bridges. So I like holding behind your thigh and bridging up and down. Now you'll see I'm not going through quite as much range of motion as the 90-90 hip extensions, but we're still using the glute. We're still getting a little bit of stretch on the way down and on the way up. All right, and these with a series of 3 for our posterior hip stretch. And now for our series on stretching out the hip flexor, we're gonna use the hip flexor first, we're gonna stretch it, and then we're gonna use it through range of motion. So to start, we're gonna be on our backs doing hip flexor isometrics. So I'm gonna stick with my right side like I was doing for the back of my hip. We're gonna be on our backs with our knee up in the air, foot up in the air as well, 90-degree bend at both, or similar, close to it. We're gonna take our right hand or left hand, whichever one you're stretching, and I'm pushing them into each other for a 5-second hold and then relaxing. And if you wanna bring your foot down for that, totally fine. You bring them back up and you push them into each other where nothing's moving, so my hand isn't pushing my knee down and my knee isn't pushing my hand up. And you're gonna feel your core engage or brace, and then relax. We're gonna make 3 more of these. So I'm doing 5 reps total for roughly 5 seconds apiece. I'm using my hip flexor. I'm telling it when to turn on and when to turn off by using it and producing an isometric contraction. If I had a rubber band, I could do these against resistance with movement and all that, but with no equipment, we're just gonna push against our own body. We have 1 more left, and then we're gonna pop up onto one knee with 1 foot forward for a hip flexor stretch. Good. So there's this refractory period, or this period after you use a muscle, that is often the best time to stretch that muscle. It's relaxed. It's gonna allow you to get a little bit deeper into your stretch. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna be down on one knee. You're gonna bend forward so you have a little rounded spine. From here, it's gonna be the easiest to produce a posterior pelvic tilt. So I'm squeezing that glute muscle. Then I'm coming up and I already feel a stretch in the front of my hip. Now you might want to push your pelvis forward, not arch your back, but push your pelvis forward so you get a little bit more stretch in your hip flexor. Now I'm gonna hold this 30 seconds, but you can hold it up to 5 minutes if you're comfortable on your knee. If you feel fine in the front of your hip, you can hold this as long as 5 minutes if you want. For the most part, myself and my clients will usually hold it 30 to 60 seconds and then switch sides, but you can do what makes you feel best. So I have about 5 seconds left here, and you can always try to grab here. You'll get a little bit more quad stretch and maybe get out of your hip flexor that way. So if you're really trying to stretch your hip flexor, just keep the foot down and back. All right, so we've stretched out our hip flexor, and from here, we're gonna use our strength through length by doing split squats, which just happen to start in this position. So I'm sticking with my right leg being the one I'm stretching. I'm gonna be going up and down back to where I started. Okay, so I'm still getting a little stretch at the bottom. I'm taking my hip flexor through a big range of motion and coming down. You might want to pitch forward, and you might get a little bit more stretch as you do this. Or you can just drop straight up and down, whatever gets a good stretch. And you're gonna go for 8 reps. I think I'm at 6. Great, okay. So that's gonna be the series that you perform to stretch out your hip flexors. Now to stretch out our hamstrings, we are gonna need our towel. Can you use a stretching strap or a rope or a belt? Absolutely, it does not need to be a towel for this portion of the stretches. To get our hamstrings warmed up, we're gonna be doing a variation of a bridge where our feet are not underneath our knees. So typically when we're doing a glute bridge, we have our heels underneath our knees. To emphasize our hamstrings a little bit more, we wanna have our feet actually away from our knees. Now the further out they are, the harder this is on your hamstrings. So just be mindful of that. We're just trying to warm up. It doesn't have to be the hardest exercise you do, okay? And so we're gonna be bridging up 10 times, Then we're going to follow this up with a very basic hamstring stretch, but basic doesn't mean ineffective. Okay, basic usually has been around a while because it works. And so we're doing 10 bridges. Just be mindful of the cramping. If you cramp, just stop and let it pass and then try to go again. And I'm at 6 or 7. You don't need to hold it any particular length. And I'm going to go for one more. Great. Now, got my towel or strap or rope or whatever it is. And I'm going to be wrapping around my right foot because I'm stretching out my right leg. And then it's just simply going up into the air for a nice little hamstring stretch. And I'm holding about 30 seconds. Check the clock. Now, if you're unable to do this, if you don't have a strap or a rope available right now, you can actually simply sit with your legs extended, grab underneath the backs of your legs while trying to maintain as straight of a back as possible. I understand that it might round and that's actually okay, but I want you to feel that stretch in the back of your legs, or you're feeling a hamstring stretch. I've got about 10 seconds left here. I'm going to finish it on the ground, but once again, you can do that modification if you don't have the equipment around. And then very simply, we're going to ditch the towel or strap or rope. You're going to lock your knees out, and you're going to lift your stretching leg as high as you can with a straight knee. Now, it doesn't matter how high you get, as long as you have a straight knee and you feel a little stretch at the top. So we're taking our hamstrings through its full available range of motion without cheating, basically. A cheat would look something like that, okay, where your knees are really bending. And you're going to make 10 reps, and then we're on to stretching our adductors. 2 more. 9 and 10. And that's that. Just like with the hamstring stretching, we are going to warm up our adductors, or the muscles of our inner thighs, by doing some bridging. And we're going to move our heels back like a traditional glute bridge, but we're going to take our towel and we're going to squeeze it between our knees to emphasize more recruitment of the adductors. So you're going to be on your back, you're going to take your towel and put it between your knees, and you're going to squeeze the heck out of it. So if there was a bunch of water in your towel, you're trying to squeeze as much out as you possibly can, all the time that you're going up and down. And if you need to stop, you just stop bridging, re-squeeze, and start bridging. You're making about 10 bridges, and you should feel your inner thighs working more than anything, okay? Once again, you're going to be making 10. Two more. And then we're going on to something called a frog stretch. All right. Now we're going to set our towel aside. So a frog stretch, I'm going to be showing you this one from the front for a little bit, is basically taking your knees out as far as you comfortably can until you feel a stretch in your inner thighs. From here, you're going to put your forearms down on the ground if possible. Now, if you can't, you can stay up here on your hands, and you're gradually going to work your knees farther and farther apart. Now, you can have your toes down if you prefer, or you can point your toes. It kind of matters, whatever's more comfortable for you. And the knees are coming out farther and farther. Once you feel a great stretch in your inner thighs, you're going to push your hips back just a tiny bit, and then you're going to rock forward a little bit. And you should be feeling a slight change in the amount of stretch you feel as you rock back. And we're just going to hang out here for another 15 seconds or so, but once again, 30 to 60 seconds total, and work your way out a little bit more if you can. We got 5 seconds left. And then once again, we're going to use these muscles through their full range of motion, or through a greater range of motion than we typically do, by performing strength through length, for what's known as a Cossack squat. So I'm gonna have my feet wider than shoulder width, but this is really based on whatever's comfortable for you. And you might find that turning your feet out makes this a little bit more easy, a little bit more comfortable, and maybe you get a little bit more stretch that way. You gotta kind of play around with your foot position for this one. See what makes you feel the most comfortable stretch in your inner thigh. So I'm gonna be squatting over to one side, so it's like I'm sitting back on a chair that's behind my heel, and I come up, and I do the same thing to the other side, and all the while I'm feeling a stretch on my inner thigh, and then I'm feeling a stretch on my other inner thigh. And so I have 4 more to go on each side. So we're making 5 total on each side. Trying to work your way over onto your opposite leg to feel as much stretch as possible as we take those adductors and work on their strength through length. You have 1 more to each side, somewhere in that family. Okay, so you're all done with your adductor stretches. Thank you for joining me for these 4 amazing hip stretches that included the warm-up and the strength through length, so you don't have to continue to battle that tightness that you're feeling all the time. Because using these muscles, once we've stretched them, is the key out of your pain.